Okay, Python and MySQL. The first thing we should do is set up the database in order to play around with some database inserts, updates, and queries. Although Python has modules available for other relational database management systems as well, like Oracle, Microsoft SQL, or PostgreSQL, I chose MySQL because it is the one I've worked with in the past and one of the most widely used. On the virtual machine you got from my drive, let's open a root terminal and verify that MySQL is installed. And then let's start the MySQL service. To start the MySQL service, use this command, service MySQL start. As you can see, it is already started on my machine. Now it's time to log into the database with the root user, which is the user with most privileges in a MySQL environment. The password to this account is also root, so let's go ahead and do this. MySQL -u for username, root, and -p. Enter. Now you type in root, R-O-O-T. After logging in, you can see some information about this MySQL server release. It looks like I'm using version 5.5.41, but it's important that you have the same major release, which is 5.5. Now I'm gonna start creating a database, and you should follow me and create the same database because we will use it in one of our applications, and we should have the same things configured. So, without further ado, the first command will create the database itself. So, create database. Let's name it netmon. And now we have a new database in our system. So you see that our database was created. There it is, netmon. The other entries in this table are some default entries that MySQL creates, so you shouldn't worry about them. The next step is to create a regular user that we are going to use for all operations on this database. The way to do this is the following. Create user. I named my user TEOPY and localhost identified by Python. Okay, it looks like I did a spelling error here, so identified. Okay, so I have created a user, assigned it this password, Python. Pretty straightforward, I think. Next, we should tell MySQL that we want this user to have all privileges on the netmon database. So this is how it's done. First, use netmon. This command references our database, gets it in use actually. Okay, now grant all on netmon dot and a star an asterisk to TOPY and localhost. Okay, notice that at the end of each command you should type in a semicolon. That is the syntax of SQL. Now it's time to create some SQL tables in which we are going to store information using Python. We'll create 5 tables in this database. First, I should tell you what this database is all about. One of our applications that we're going to build later will extract some parameters from the routers in GNS3, parameters like the CPU or processor utilization on each switch, memory utilization, and the number of interfaces that are up. Also, it will calculate an average of each of these parameters and input these values in the corresponding MySQL table, along with the timestamp for each extraction and the top 3 CPU-intensive devices or memory-intensive devices. Further, using the Linux cron tab, you can schedule that Python application to run every 5 minutes, for example, and each time add the values it finds on the routers for statistic purposes and network monitoring. And now you know why our database is called netmon. Now let's get back to creating the tables. The first table will have the role of a device inventory. Here we are going to store different information extracted from each router, like the host name, the model, the iOS version, uptime, or routing protocols running on each of them. So let me copy the command because it is pretty long. Okay. paste it right here. I have attached this txt file to this lecture. Here you can find the commands I'm going to use to create tables and populate them, so you can just copy and paste them into your MySQL shell. So this table is called network devices, and the columns of this table will be called hostname, MAC address, vendor, and so on. When defining an SQL table column, you should also specify what type of data will be stored in that column. For example, varchar means a variable length string having the maximum length given by the number that follows it, so 30 characters right here. Int means an integer, and you will also see other data types as well. Now let me create the other 4 tables, also by copy and pasting them. The first thing we notice here is the new MySQL data type, and this is float, followed by 2 integers in between parentheses, separated by a comma. This means that floating point numbers are expected here, and not just any numbers, but floating point numbers with a maximum of 6 digits, including the decimal point, of which 2 digits should be after the decimal point. So something like, let's say, 123.45. Okay, so we have the CPU utilization table for information about processor usage, the procmem utilization table for information about the memory that is allocated to various processes on the router. Then we have the IO mem utilization table, which refers to memory dedicated to traffic like routing updates or broadcasts. And finally, the UP Ethernet interfaces table, which holds data about the number of UP interfaces in the network. To see the tables you created, use the show tables command. So show tables and a semicolon. Now to see a specific table and the columns it contains, use the describe command like this. Describe and then the name of the table, let's say network devices. Okay, now it's time to do some operations on one of our tables. Insert some data, query the database, and other fun stuff. Let's take the network devices table, for example, and see how to create a row in this table. Well, actually 2 rows, using the insert into SQL command. So let me paste the command here and then explain it. Okay, so we have insert into, this is SQL syntax, the table name, then all the columns in which you want to input data in between parentheses, so up until this point. Then the values keyword, which is also SQL syntax, and then the values for each column in order, in between parentheses, and that's it. And don't forget the semicolon at the end. Okay, now let's change a few values and insert another row. So let's change some values. Let's say 12.2. Let's change the model. Okay. Well, we got an error because the MAC ADDR column is also a primary key. This means that each value in this column must be unique. So I forgot to change the value for the MAC address. I'll go ahead and do this right now. Okay. Now it's great. Okay. Now you can verify the data in the table using the following command, also called a query. So select an asterisk, which means all, from, and now the table name. Let's say network devices. Okay, it doesn't look too pretty because it has a lot of columns, but you should get the idea. Okay, the last SQL things I'll show you before closing this lecture are a couple of other SQL queries. For example, let's create a simple query that returns the rows in the table for which the iOS version is 12.4. So let me go ahead and type this. Select all from network devices where iOS version equals, and in between simple quotes or single quotes, 12.4 and a semicolon. Okay, so we got this row in the table right here because this is where we got the 12.4 iOS version. Okay, pretty cool. Now let's do another one. Let's say you want to find out the router host names in your network that run BGP. So you would write this query. Select host name, because we only want the host name to be displayed, from network devices where ext routing pro equals, and in between single quotes, BGP. Of course, in our case, we have only two routers, both running BGP, as you can see right here. No, right here. Okay. So both of them are returned. Now, the last one, I promise. Let's say you want to see how many of the routers registered in your database are running each iOS version. This is a bit more tricky. You'll do something like this. Select iOS version, comma, count of iOS version from network devices. And now another keyword, actually two keywords, group by iOS version, and a semicolon at the end. So indeed we have one router with version 12.2 and another one with version 12.4. Great. I'm not going to get deeper into SQL and MySQL. There are other courses that do that. I just wanted you to grasp some basics so you will know how can Python interact with MySQL, and that's what we'll see in the next lecture.